الحمد لله الذي كفى والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المصطفى. Dear brothers and sisters who have gathered here for the Islamic Society of North America, the world is looking for Muslims, and Muslims are silent. Some of us are speaking. My hope is this presentation inspire more of us to be active. The largest concentration camps since the Nazis exist right now in China. China first denied it, then they say, oh, well, there are a re-education camp, and then they took some journalists who were able to figure it out, what is going on here. It's proven through satellite after satellite through satellite. And it's not a fiction, brothers and sisters. It pains to Uyghur Muslim when people take it in a geopolitical situation, as some people in the Muslim world say, well, no, there's, America versus China, it's all politics, and Trump is trying to do trade war and all that. It's real. I'm personally a witness of that. I have seen from my eyes broken masjids. 5,000 masjids have been demolished. I took photographs of about one largest street of the largest city. I take complete photographs of all the masjid which has been destroyed. A person while talking to me was detained and taken to in a boxed van. And everywhere that van goes with siren, people all around go silent because that is a death van. Anybody goes in there, does not come out. It's not a fiction. I have spoken to Sister Mehergul Dursun, one of the two sisters and one of the two people who have arrived in the United States who have been in those camps. She says that she was given medicine as other 60 women in that small room of the concentration camps. Some will start profusely bleeding and some period will stop. And she has been tested. She can no longer bear children. She has triplet. That's why her mother asked her to come back to Xinjiang or Eastern Turkestan, and children were snatched away. She was sent to the concentration camp, and one baby was lost. She was smart enough. She says, well, I'm Chinese national, but my children are foreign national, whether they were born, and they will come after. She was given a death sentence, and she has clothes with the colored writing on it. She is destined to die. When she played that card and it worked, they deported her within 24 hours. Say, where are my babies? Gave the frozen body of one child, which was dead for a while, and two other children to her. It is real. It's not a fiction. Because of geostrategic reason play between China and America, many Muslim countries are silent about it. But you and I live in America. We don't have to be silent about that. China is the only country, brothers and sisters, the only country in the world other than Burma where population of Muslims is going down. In 1952, in Bandung, Indonesia, Zhou Enlai, the Prime Minister of China, said we have 50 million Muslims. You take your calculator and look online. The population of population growth of China in general population growth in China, apply that percentage to 50 million Muslim in 1952. And you will find, wow, there are more than 200 million Muslims. You know how many Muslim Chinese government says there? 19 million. What happened? What happened to so many Muslims? This is the only country other than Burma where officially Muslim population is going down. Muslims need to stand up and be with Uyghur people, understand their stories, learn from them. We are going to issue a report in this month when Great ISNA Convention is taking place about what happened to 5,000 masjid, what's happening to imams. And the corporations are involved. And thanks to the effort of Uyghur people, Uyghur Human Rights Project, World Uyghur Congress, whose president gave a message of greeting for you, and Aydin Anwar, who is director of Save Uyghur Project, Her video is watched by more than 83 million people across the country. Uyghurs' voices are being heard. And we are in support of Uyghur voices. We stand with them. These brothers and sisters, many of them cannot speak openly because as soon as they speak, they kidnap their relatives over there. You have a name Muhammad, right? You're listening to this. Your name is Muhammad, or you may have name Fatima or Aisha. If you have that name, it is enough for you to be detained. You have a cell phone, right? I got a cell phone. You have a cell phone. If you have a cell phone, you must install a particular chip. You say, okay, I will install a chip, but I'm not going to talk. You're not talking? Detained. You will be detained. You will be arrested, taken to the concentration camp because you have something to hide. That chip is a spy chip for the Chinese government, which you must have. If you're talking, making phone calls overseas, that's a reason for you to be detained. Just yesterday, I interviewed on Muslim Network TV, which is on Galaxy 19 and Raku TV and other places, a NASA scientist named Dr. Arkin Siddiq. He was visiting there and he was not allowed to speak to universities. And that was before this big crackdown happened. It was in 2009. So scientists and professors and students gathered. There's a guy from NASA has visiting his homeland in eastern Turkestan. China called it Xinjiang. Xinjiang means new colony. So China is not known for truthfulness, but they have truthfully named that area new colony, Xinjiang, because it was never part of China. They occupied it. And he showed me the photo. He's standing in midst of almost 100 or plus people. He says each one of those scientists, professors, and students who gathered have been taken to the concentration camp. I met a sister who didn't allow me to share her name. And it was so nightmarish listening to her that for the first time I composed a poem in my dream. I am not a poet in any language of the world, although I know 6, 7 languages. It was nightmarish because she has 6 sisters. All their husbands are taken to the concentration camps. All their children taken forcefully to Chinese orphanages where they are turned into non-Muslims, communists. And what is happening in their homes? They have placed 6 Chinese men in the homes of each one of those sisters. They're destroying Chinese Uyghur Muslims there. Chinese girls, Uyghur girls, are forced to marry Chinese communist non-Muslim men. So their next generation is gone. They're being raped. Are those in concentration camp giving medicine? So they are no longer bearing children. And out of 60 women in that Mehergul Tirsan concentration camp, 9 of those in 3 months collapsed and died. Their body was dragged away. They cannot, it was so small, they cannot sleep on the floor together. So some stand up and some go on sleep. And in the corner, she says, it's an open air toilet. And there is a television camera at the top watching them. This is happening to our sisters. This is the truth, brothers and sisters. Share with others. Nothing else we can do, we can make dua. But this is the time something could be done. Politicians are talking. It's a bipartisan issue. Trump is in support of it. Nancy Pelosi is in support of it. Biden is in support of this cause. Because of the sacrifices of Uyghur people, this is now known thing. It's a bipartisan issue. There are some sanctions on the companies like that. More need to be there. But here's something which I'd like you to do. You get Republicans on a Zoom link, have 50 or 100 people from the Muslim community and get a Republican congressperson or senators in a Zoom gathering, in a town hall meeting. Or get Democrats, senators, congressperson, Joe Biden people, and talk to them about these issues. We can provide you talking points, we can provide you memos, or you can Google it yourself. There's a lot of information available. And in that way, you push forward this particular issue. So what we are looking for? What we're looking for is when trade negotiations take place with China, in those trade negotiations, there should be a human right expert who is fully aware of what is going on in these Nazis, in these concentration camps. You see, the world changed after the World War II. We said never again. We'll not allow genocide to happen. Open the textbook about the genocide, and all the signs of genocide will apply to what is happening to Uyghur people. They have eliminated their culture, they destroyed their mosque, they are using forced labor. All this clothes which we have, watch out. 30% of all clothes in America come from China. And scholars, I was present there in the Senate hearing, when scholar after scholars testify that 80% of all Chinese export of clothes involves slave laborers of Xinjiang or East Turkestan Muslim people. They're forcing them to labor, and that labor comes in terms of cheap, inexpensive clothing to America. And there are other products also coming like that. So when you're talking to that congressperson and senator, first you will have to talk to 100, 200 Muslims, convince them it is important. Then tell them that you will have Zoom meeting and you want them to be there, and talk to them that when trade negotiation with China takes place, a human right expert on Uyghur issue need to be present. This is the key demand which we have. So the second thing which we like to achieve through that is that the trade sanctions which are placed by Trump administration on China are strengthened. There are other organizations who are involved and businesses, they need to be added to the list. Third thing we like, there are 350,000 Chinese students in this country. Some of them are strong party member of the Communist Party. What are they doing? They're harassing Uyghur brothers and sisters right here in America. Mayor Good has to move 3 times in Washington, D.C., Virginia area because of harassment. Chinese harassing Uyghur people in America itself. So the third thing which we want is that America keeps an eye on these Chinese foreign students so they don't abuse our system to harass Uyghur people and people from Hong Kong who are fighting for freedom, democracy. Another thing, many of Muslims in America have relationship and contacts with people. Prince and princess of the Middle East are studied here. Children of dictators are studied here. Elite of the Muslim world, there are 57 Muslim countries. Those elites are right here in America. They are around us. We need to educate them and get them. And once you hear something about Uyghurs in English language, and SaveUyghur.org's website, and there are UHRP, Uyghur Human Rights Project.org is another website. You get that information, translate it in your language, whatever language you have, and circulate it among your people back home and all that. Brothers and sisters, innamal mu'minun akhwa. All Muslims are sisters and brothers. If not much you can do, you remember them, learn about them, make dua for them, and engage your politicians to support them. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aiden. I am an Uyghur and I currently work for the Save Uyghur campaign under Justice for All. Right now, I'm just gonna quickly go through a little bit of the history and then delve into my own personal story and kind of close off with what exactly the Save Uyghur campaign under Justice for All has been doing and what we plan to do. And the reason why I'm going to go through the history in the beginning is because I think this is something that is usually left out of the conversation, left out of the narrative. People often think we're Chinese minorities, ethnic minorities, that we are Chinese Muslims, which is a complete which is a complete lie. And I will, and people need to understand the fact that we are Turkic people that are occupied. That's why I'm actually emphasizing and starting off this video with that. So essentially, just to give a quick rundown, we had been living with centuries of independence until the Manchu Qing dynasty invaded East Turkestan in 1759. After that point, the Uyghurs rebelled, and then and the Qing dynasty actually collapsed in 1911. 1912 is when nationalist China came to power, and that's when the first official Chinese invasion took place. And then after that, you actually had Uyghurs rebel a few more times and actually created the first East Turkestan Islamic Republic in 1933, which was short-lived, and then again in 1944, which lasted a period of 5 years, ended in 1949 when Communist China came to power. So since 1949, East Turkestan has been under the occupation of Communist China and have been enduring forms of physical, cultural genocide. I think I'm emphasizing that word genocide because it wasn't until recently, maybe a month ago, when we had reports of forced sterilization coming out of the region that people are calling it a genocide. But us activists have actually been saying this for years now. China has shown overt efforts to basically erase the Uyghur population, and right now, even myself, I'm obviously not in East Turkestan, but I have 93 relatives from both my mom and dad's side who we deem as missing. We have no way of contacting them. We don't know their whereabouts. We don't know how many are in camps and in prisons, and we don't know, we don't even have a proper way of contacting them, even if we wanted to. We can't pick up our phone like, what most of us would do, and when we want to contact someone, we can't pick up the phone and call them because doing so would actually endanger them. And even if we manage to contact our relative, let's say they actually pick up the phone, you can't talk openly about what's happening. You can't ask what's happening. People end up using code language, which you end up having to decipher on your own to figure out, what is happening over there. But you can see through the people's faces, oftentimes if they're able to FaceTime or call their parents, that things are not in order. And it's obvious even through what we're getting from media, through satellite imagery about the construction of concentration camps, of prisons, these mass sentencing of Uyghurs and Turkic people into prisons for arbitrary things like wearing hijab, finding a Quran recitation on someone's phone, having the name Muhammad or Fatima. You don't even have to have a religious act, just simply learning the Uyghur language, learning about your own Turkic identity. These are all deemed as crimes by the Chinese government, and they result anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 years. And so this is just my story of not being able to contact my relatives who are, where we estimate dozens of them are in some form of detention or imprisonment. This is just one of millions of stories. Right now we have millions of these people in concentration camps and prisons, and then children in basically a children's version of a concentration camp where they're basically being forcibly brainwashed by the Chinese government in orphanages and boarding schools while their parents are actually in detention as well, also being forcibly brainwashed and then subjected to abuse and forms of genocide like forced sterilization, being forced to take drugs that are unknown, this mass family separation, which in itself is a traumatizing event for anyone to endure. And then obviously, even if you're outside of these camps and prisons, people are subjected to massive surveillance. Han Chinese government officials living in your homes to monitor your every action. We have even reports of male Chinese government officials living in Uyghur homes where the husbands are not there because they're in some form of detention and forced to sleep with Uyghur women in their homes. So, I mean, then you have a state-sponsored rape in your own home as well. So this is kind of a quick rundown of, what has happened, but essentially since 9/11, China has used the global war on terror which was launched by the US in 2004, to basically justify what they're doing to the Uyghur and other Turkic people. They're using religion to justify what they are doing by basically claiming these people are potential, are dangerous to terrorist radical ideas and acts, and therefore we have to, quote, cleanse their minds, because we need to, make them into normal people so that they are not a threat to the state. And so that is their justification for what they're doing, but in reality it's also just a way to continue the occupation, to erase our population so that they can continue maintaining tight control over the mineral-rich land, which China holds dear to itself, to its economy, and to its well-being and survival, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into what the Save Uyghur campaign has done under Justice for All. For over a year now, the Justice for All has done amazing work to uplift the Uyghur voices. I myself, before joining Justice for All, I myself didn't, I was actually very impressed to see that Justice for All was one of the first organizations that were not run by Uyghur people, that were actually standing up for the Uyghur cause. Because for a while we were, we always felt like we were sidelined. We felt like we were the only ones doing work, and it was exhausting because no one knew us, no one knew who we were as a people. And to see finally these entities standing up and doing something about it really moved me, and also a lot of people in our community as well. So just I'm going to kind of run through some of the things that we've done, and huge accomplishments by the Save Uyghur campaign under Justice for All, which is, by the way, powered by Sound Vision. And one of them, we have, for example, the Fast from China campaign, which was launched last Ramadan, or sorry, 2 Ramadans ago, when we basically called on people to fast from China. Other than fasting from food and water during Ramadan, fast from Chinese-made products. We had the Sown with Tears campaign, basically calling on people to, keep in mind the fact that a lot of the clothing that you may be purchasing that's made in China could actually be sourced from modern day slaves that China is now creating and using from those who are detained in concentration camps and prisons. And now things don't, even if something isn't necessarily made in China, things can still be sourced from modern day slaves in East Turkestan. And so now, and there was a recent report talking about how 83 companies were complicit in this. And so, we've also been we've joined a coalition to really amplify and call on these companies to stop stop being complicit in these crimes against humanities and in these genocidal acts in the 21st century. We've also called on people to boycott brands for Eid. We've joined a roundtable letter, which was drafted by the International Religious Freedom Roundtable on the Uyghur cause to the State Department. We've interviewed family victims on our Justice for All Now show, which is working to amplify a lot of the stories and a lot of people's personal cases where they're actually vouching for their family's release. We've held an amnesty panel on the Uyghur persecution. I've even through our work with the UN as well. I actually went to the UN, and there was a meeting with the ambassador, one of the Chinese ambassadors for that month, for the UN Security Council, and I was able to pose a question directly to the ambassador, asking, how does China justify what they're doing under the name of national security? And he wasn't able to answer. We got that live recorded and really exposed the kind of hypocrisy and the way that the Chinese government thinks and is able to carry out their actions. We've had ISNA panels on the Uyghur persecution. We continued, using our resources and to hold presentations around the country, and educate the population. So I've through Justice for All, been able to speak at universities, mosques, and other faith areas to spread awareness on what is happening and what people can do to help. We've also, one of the biggest things is help push the passage of the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, which was signed by Trump recently. That was after years and months and years of advocacy, of meeting with Congress people, of organizing advocacy days to have our Congress and senators, our Congress people and senators to sign on this act, which essentially is aimed to sanction Chinese officials for their crimes and to stop the atrocities back in East Turkestan. And so some of the things we're working on right now and are upcoming, we are planning to have another digital lobby day or Uyghur advocacy day. Due to COVID, it has to be a digital event. And that we're having an online exhibit where people can walk through victim stories and really humanize each story. We even developed a one-pager for Congress to use to really run down what is happening in East Turkestan meets the conditions of genocide. Because again, I think that's something that a lot of people have not been using that term, and that really does affect the way that the international community and international law can actually respond to what is happening sooner. So we've developed that one pager. We're also going to be publishing it on our website very soon, and really trying to normalize the usage of that term. And then we also have, an upcoming report talking about basically exposing how Google is actually complicit in the forced labor and human rights atrocities that are actually occurring in East Turkestan. And interestingly enough, Google actually wasn't listed as one of the 83 companies in ASPI's report discussing companies that are complicit. So this is a report that is meant to expose that as well. And then finally, we're also trying to form a pledge against what is called halal organs, which China calls after basically removing organs of live prisoners through their organ harvesting campaign and sending it to the black market, which oftentimes ends up in Saudi Arabia. We're trying to basically organize a pledge from doctors and general people as well about signing against the usage of halal organs. We will hope to have this letter signed by medical professionals across the United States, and to have this be a well-known issue so that China is held accountable for what they're doing. So these are just some of the many things that we are working on. Thank you so much for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. May peace and blessings be on all of you. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and blessings to his holy prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today I've been asked to speak about the humanitarian situation in Yemen. Unfortunately, there isn't much peace over there, or tranquility. Actually, there's a perfect storm that has made Yemen into the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. That is several years of conflict, large number, millions of people displaced from their homes, a famine that has led to 80% of the people dependent on humanitarian aid and protection. The situation is so bad in Yemen that Yemeni refugees were going to Somalia at the beginning of the crisis. And if it's not conflict, if it's not famine, you also have locusts coming, eating the crops, cholera, killing people, especially kids, and of course COVID-19. As of June 30th, 1/4 of confirmed cases of COVID-19 died as a result of COVID-19. That is 5 times the global average. At the same time, that 24 million people, that's 80% of the population, are dependent on humanitarian aid due to various problems between the Houthi government in the north and the main providers, that is the UN, of humanitarian aid. There's unfortunately a standoff in some areas. The UN is concerned that the aid, is it really getting to where it's needed in the best way? And in this standoff, it has meant that many of the core UN humanitarian programs have either been decreased or been stopped. So less food is getting to people this year than it was last year. It's not just about money. It's about delivering the aid to where it's really needed. Within Yemen, you have some areas under the Houthi control, you have some areas under government control, and then you have some areas under militia controls, and then you have some areas under other people's control. But our main concern with the humanitarian situation is in the north at the moment. We are very, very concerned of aid getting there, being able to get there, and then being distributed. During the siege of Hodeidah, it was extremely difficult to get food in over there. We were able, through the organization I represent, Islamic Relief, to do distribution in Hodeidah. But that food came from the WFP through the port over there. So when we hear in the news that there's no food that's available, it can't go in, no, that's not true. Food can go in certain circumstances, and that's through the courageous effort of many humanitarians who have been trying to deal with both sides of the conflict to guarantee that food and humanitarian supplies are able to reach places where they're really needed. In some places, Islamic Relief, for example, outside of Hodeidah, has partnered with the UN to get aid to places where for years they weren't able to get aid. So the UN World Food Programme is providing the largest amount of food to Yemen. It is working with different partners, including Islamic Relief and other partners of different faith and no faith, to deliver the aid. I remember when Islamic Relief USA started in Yemen, it was before the conflict, years before. And we were working in different areas, but it was mostly for development projects, water projects. Now those projects are still being done, some of them, but now it's not about trying to increase the amount of water to help with growing more food. It's very simple, just to provide clean water so children aren't dying of cholera. What do I mean by this? I remember last year on my trip to Yemen, I was just outside of Hodeidah, and we went to some mountains nearby, and there was a disused water well which Islamic Relief in Yemen was able to rehabilitate with funding that we got from our Christian friends, Catholic Relief Services, and a secular organization from France. You have Muslims, Christians, and secular people of different and no faith working together to renovate the water system. There, what we were able to do is to pump the water out of the ground through solar power. So we built solar power that provided the energy for the pump, which was rehabilitated to work. Then it sent up the mountain, down the mountain, a few kilometers, water to the village. And then that village was able to get clean water. Now in that village that I visited, none of the children had died from cholera in the preceding few months. But in the village next door, where we weren't able to provide water, many children were still dying. And I remember the medical professionals were begging us, can you please send us more medicine? And we said, look, we are working in coordination with our international partners, with the World Health Organization and others. We are trying to see where the most need is and send medicine where it's really needed. But as far as cholera is concerned, our main concern in this area is to make sure that we prevent it by providing clean water. So they were grateful for that, but they were asking for more medicine. And when I was in Sana'a, I'm seeing the statistics, half of the health institutions are not working or up to the capacity that they should be at. What does that mean? I went to the largest maternity hospital in Sana'a, and over there they showed me that not one baby incubator in that unit, in that whole room, was working properly. Some of them, they had more plastic than metal on their machines. They had been trying to repurpose and fix these machines for years. Not one was working properly over there. As I was touring the largest maternity hospital in Sana'a, There was a gentleman sitting on the floor with his child, begging us to save his child's life. The doctor explained that they can provide basic health care, but this is a complication for this child, and unless they have go to a private hospital to get expensive treatment, the child will die. And they advised the father to go online and try to raise money through Facebook. And I said, what are the chances of that for that child? They said he's probably going to die. I saw child after child in that hospital. And these were the lucky children that had been able to get from the smaller villages up to the capital and were able to get into bed. They were being saved. Many of them, alhamdulillah, were on saline solution. They were getting basic medical treatment, and they were eating specific food to help them to come back to nearly, at least close to a normal body weight. But these children, some of them, they looked like they were human skeletons, and these were the lucky ones that were, mashallah, started the journey to come back to become more healthy. In Hodeidah, I remember there was a 16-year-old boy that was lying on a bed, and he was just withering away. And I asked, what's his prognosis? What's the way to treat him? They said, we can't treat him. If he was suffering from malnutrition, we could help. If it was cholera, we could help. But this boy has other complications with other diseases. We're not going to be able to help. We're waiting for him to die. And after he dies, then we can put another child on the bed, and we might be able to save that child. That's how bad the situation is. This is what, when people talk about what's happening in Yemen, it's the worst humanitarian crisis. Can you imagine just sitting there? One is sitting there, and one's child is dying, and one is being told to go and do a Facebook fundraising page. How can you do that when you don't have electricity? And you don't have an internet connection? In Aden in the south, where the situation is meant to be slightly better than in the north, it's still very bad over there. There's a lot of people who are not able to live at home. They're living in whatever shelter they can find. I won't even call it a refugee camp, I just call it shelters. And I remember one clinic which is run by another non-profit. This was rehabilitated by Islamic Relief with money from the Swedish government, with Islamic Relief together. We rehabilitated it and gave it to another international charity that is running that clinic over there. So you have governments, you have international organizations like the UN, you have faith-based organizations, secular organizations, really working hard. But even then, it's very difficult. One of our drivers last year for Islamic Relief in Yemen, unfortunately, was shot in the head by a stray bullet, and he died. People are dying to implement Surah Al-Maun. Have you seen those that rejecteth the faith as those that rejecteth the orphan and urgeth not the feeding of the needy? It is our job to urge the feeding of the needy. And there are people risking their life to deliver that aid. And they're dying in Yemen. But there's too many children who are in need. I remember somebody asked me when I was sitting on the floor, and it was we had a little bit of food. It was time for lunch, and they said, "It's just you seem really affected by what you saw in the clinic and in the feeding centers today." He's talking about children about to die and hunger, and you could smell desperation in the parents. He said, "This must be the worst you've ever seen." I said, "No. I have seen desperation and people starving to death in different parts of the world over the last 27 years. The colors change, sometimes the religion change, but desperation is desperation. You can smell desperation. You can smell the fear. And this is just another crisis. Yes, it's the worst, but too many people have died around the world because they don't have water, because they don't have food. It shouldn't be a competition. But we're asking you to pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps them, to speak, to advocate for them. Whether that be contacting your senator, your congressman, to see There's different bills that are going through the House and through the Senate to support them, to tell our senators and our congressmen to help in Yemen. And we're really worried about COVID-19 spreading over there. But without COVID-19, we still got cholera. Without cholera, we still have a famine. Without famine, we still have a conflict. They are dying in multiple ways. Let us try to help them in multiple ways. Remember, it is our responsibility, job description as Muslims, to urge the feeding of the needy, as we saw in Surah Al-Maun. May Allah bless you and protect your families. Please do what you can for the people of Yemen, for the people of Syria and all over the world, whether they be Rohingya, whether they be in Venezuela, whether they be in humanitarian crisis in Kashmir or anywhere in the world. For all nations, please do what you can.
I'm in Hodeidah, 2 kilometers from the front line.
I'm here in Sana'a, Yemen.
I'm here in Tuban district, which is in Lahaj Governorate in the south of Yemen. There are 2 million displaced people in Yemen. Abdul fled the fighting twice. He lived in the Hajjah area near the Saudi Yemeni border. These are the stories that make up that number of 2 million.
One of the acute problems here is malnutrition. You can see how small his hands are, and you can see the results of malnutrition. We didn't want him to take his clothes off to show you. We shouldn't eat it.
So there's a whole backlog here. Outside in the corridor, there were men and women and kids on the floor. So everything is overflowing over here. I'm in a primary healthcare facility that Islamic Relief rehabilitated to become an active health clinic. It's got over 100 patients that come. As you can see, it's mostly women and little children that are coming. They're suffering from malnutrition, from cholera. We're struggling to get this message out, but if you just hear behind me, you can hear the cries.
We should not turn our backs on the children of Yemen.
Hello and salamu alaikum to everybody joining us today. My name is Jennifer Medower and I am the Operations Manager at UMR. I'd first like to begin by thanking you for joining us to discuss this extremely important topic on the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the ISNA Convention Program Committee for inviting us to speak at this session. Today, we are addressing one of the world's most pressing problems, the ongoing conflict in Yemen. This past March, the war in Yemen entered its 6th year and remains the world's worst humanitarian crisis of our time. The devastation has been profound. The stories we hear, the images we see from the ongoing conflict, continue to victimize the most innocent of people, women, children, mothers, and fathers. It is indeed most devastating. To date, according to UNICEF, more than 80% of Yemen's population is in need of some kind of humanitarian assistance. It is unimaginable the kind of desperation the people are facing. Out of the 28 million Yemenis in need, 12 million of them are children, and they are the ones that are suffering the most. Parts of Yemen have succumbed to malnutrition and famine without any humanitarian food aid in sight. The reality in Yemen seems almost indescribable. The healthcare infrastructure is almost non-existent in many areas, with reports of approximately 50%, that's half, of Yemen's hospitals being inoperable. This is catastrophic in any country, but in a place ravaged by constant war, cholera, disease, rain floods, economic collapse, and now COVID-19, the collapse of the healthcare system has enormous consequences. There have already been hundreds of confirmed COVID-19 cases, although Doctors Without Borders says that that number is likely much higher. With no adequate testing, no PPE, or easy access to healthcare, this leaves transmissions unchecked and no room for contact tracing. Resources are scarce and inaccessible, especially since many families have become displaced within Yemen due to the war. The most frightening thing about this situation is perhaps the psychological and physical trauma that the people of Yemen will have to live with. This struggle has penetrated generations, and we can only hope that humanitarian initiatives towards relief and rehabilitation will also permeate generations to come. I'd like to take this moment now to show you some of the faces of the beneficiaries that we've met and supported in Yemen. I think it's important that you see their faces, that you hear their voices in their own words of their struggles.
السلام عليكم يا أختي.
عليكم السلام.
زوجك هل عنده مصدر دخل غير البحر؟
لا، يروح البحر بس. يروح البحر ولا مع أي شيء.
وإذا لم يعني يكون معها، إذا ما حصلش رزق أو بيس، كيف تعملوا؟ من فين تاكلوا؟
خلاص من نحصل بيس ونحصل رزق من البحر نشتري مصروف بين البيت ونناقص ناكله، ما نحصلش خلاص. أما أغلب البحر ولا معنا أي شغل.
إيش تحتاجوا أنتوا في رمضان؟
في رمضان إيش نحتاج؟ نحتاج صرفية رمضان.
إيش؟
كم حلبية وفنتو وبر ورز سكر.
طبعا احنا اليوم بالتاسع من رمضان، كل سنة وانتم طيبين. منظمة الUMR ومنظمة مسلمو العالم تهديك اليوم طرد غذائي
شكرا للمنظمة اللي بالنسبة الغذائية.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
كيف حالك؟
الحمد لله.
الوالد أبو الطفل عاد يعيش؟
ايه.
فين يشتغل؟
بحر.
في البحر. إذا ما فيش رزق في البحر من فين تاكلوا؟
الله يحول.
زي يعني منو يحول يعني؟
ربي.
من فين يعني نجيبك؟
من ربك يحول من البحر ومن يبيعوا أي حاجة يدوروا له من يلقحوا ربك حول.
في منظمات أخرى تجي أحيانا تدعم، تدي لكم سلات غذائية، تدي لكم
الهلال الأحمر، حق الهلال الأحمر.
إيش تحتاجوا في رمضان؟
نحتاج الفطور، نحتاج البران، نحتاج كل حاجة تحتاج.
زي إيش تحتاجوا؟ دقيق وإيش يعني؟ ما الحاجات اللي تحتاجيها في البيت في رمضان؟
تحتاج التمر برو وسمبوسة، وتحتاج دبة، تحتاج لك كل شيء، صاروا برو.
طبعا احنا اليوم التاسع من رمضان، كل سنة وانتم طيبين
إن شاء الله.
منظمة الUMR ومنظمة مسلمو العالم قدمت لك ولا ابنك طرد غذائي. البقية يروحوا يشيلوا الحاجات.
أشكر هذه المنظمة اللي تبرع لنا، احنا بنسلي.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كل سنة وانت طيب.
وانت طيب إن شاء الله.
بسألك شوية أسئلة. هل عندك مصدر رزق؟
الحمد لله في السوق نمشي لنا كذا نحمل.
ايش تشتغل؟
حمال عتالة.
حمال.
إيه.
كم دخلك باليوم؟
يوم 2000 يوم 3 يوم 4 على ما رزق الله.
ايش حاجتكم في رمضان؟
والله حاجات كثيرة. ولم أنا حاجة الله دحين نمشي على محب الله.
زي يعني ايش طلباتك في رمضان؟
صرفة تحتاج أي ذم اسمه حاجات كثيرة حق رمضان.
زي ايش؟
زي دقيق زي رز زي سكر زي عصيرات يعني حاجات رمضان انت تعرف هذه.
طبعا احنا اليوم 9 من شهر رمضان، كل سنة وانتم طيبين ورمضان كريم.
كل سنة.
منظمة UMR ومنظمة مسلمو العالم تقدم لقبوله ولك طرد غذائي مكون من بعض المواد الغذائية.
حياكم الله إن شاء الله وجزاهم الله.
ممكن تقدم كلمة شكر للمنظمة؟
جزاهم الله ألف خير وشكرا جزيلا لمن كلهم هم بخير إن شاء الله.
We have a responsibility to act. We must ensure that our brothers and sisters in Yemen are not forgotten. UMR has been part of various initiatives across the region, but has held a special role in assisting the people of Yemen. Through our supporters and donors, we have been able to provide extensive medical aid since the conflict began. For the last 5 years, our team has worked diligently to secure tens of large container shipments valued at several $million to the hospitals in Yemen. Our team on the ground has distributed medical supplies, equipment, vital medications, and more to ensure that we are doing our part in alleviating their pain. According to one of the doctors on the ground, they said, "We can't thank you enough for the medicine you've sent and the many lives that you helped save." Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East. In 2020, the Famine Early Warning Systems Network, which measures food security in countries around the world, found that over half of Yemen's population is facing crisis levels or worse of food insecurity, and that a famine could be declared by December if conditions continue to deteriorate. For a famine to be declared, at least 20% of a region's population has to experience extreme food shortages, with significant numbers of deaths due to starvation. Because of these staggering statistics, UMR has stepped up its food security program in Yemen. We've added more food distributions than ever before. We distribute large food parcels containing items like sugar, oil, beans, flour, pasta to some of the most vulnerable families. We select families by looking at things like how many people live in their household, whether or not they are disabled, orphaned, or widowed. This ensures that we are truly helping the hardest hit victims of this atrocity. Our team has visited some of the most devastated areas and spoken directly with some of our beneficiaries about their struggles. Their stories we've heard and the images we've seen are some that we won't soon forget. All struggles are relative, unique in their context, but all struggles are united by pain, and inshallah they will be erased by relief and rehabilitation. With the threat of a cholera epidemic and the rising number of COVID-19 cases, we reiterate our commitment to tackling health concerns and food insecurity in Yemen. Cholera remains a threat, with 22 of the 23 governorates in Yemen affected. It feels as though the world has stopped paying attention to their suffering because so many other places are suffering as well. However, I assure you that we have not forgotten. And this message goes out to all of our Yemeni brothers and sisters, both here in the US and abroad. We are with you. We are praying for you, and we will continue to support you. UMR will be in Yemen so long as we are needed there. As we talk about Yemen, we need to amplify the voices of the people who are not being heard. We must ensure that the crisis stays in the spotlight and that we are doing everything we can to put an end to this ongoing conflict. The crisis doesn't just have direct consequences. There are also indirect consequences that we won't be able to measure until decades to come. Before COVID-19, around 2 million children in Yemen were out of school. 2 million. And now that schools are closed to help curb the pandemic, roughly 7.8 million children are unable to access education. How can we ensure that we are not losing an entire generation of kids to such senseless violence? Yemeni children deserve a chance to grow up in a healthy environment without the threat of hunger or death. UNICEF reports that 1 child dies every 10 minutes from preventable causes. The country is on the brink of total collapse, and what we are seeing now is several generations of trauma that may never recover. When you combine so many layers of challenges, economic hardship, food scarcity, unemployment, lack of proper health care and hygiene services, and then you wrap them up with a global pandemic, you are truly facing a desperate situation. We cannot stop until every child has food to eat, until every mother can sleep peacefully at night, and every father has the chance to provide for his family. UMR stands with the people in Yemen, and we will continue to fight and support you in every way that we can. Thank you for listening. I hope you hear this message, and we wish you nothing but peace and happiness in years to come. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you again to ISNA for hearing our plea, and we ask everyone that's listening to please keep the people of Yemen in your hearts and in your prayers, and please support them any way that you can. Assalamu alaikum.